Bom dia a todos. Dando continuidade à nossa programação de webinars, gostaríamos de hoje temos um convidado muito especial, que é o professor Ian Jackson. Ele vai falar sobre os desafios da tecnologia da informação em implementar centros cirúrgicos ambulatoriais inteligentes. Falando um pouco sobre o Dr. Ian Jackson, ele é graduado em Aberdeen, em 1981, e foi nomeado, então, médico assistente em anestesiologia na cidade de York, em 1989. Em York, ele liderou o desenvolvimento da cirurgia ambulatorial e ajudou a estabelecer uma nova unidade de cirurgia ambulatorial com 6 salas de cirurgia. Eleito para o Conselho Executivo da Associação Britânica de Cirurgia Ambulatorial em 1994, atuou como tesoureiro honorário e editor do Journal of One Day Surgery e depois como presidente da Associação Britânica de Cirurgia Ambulatorial. É também ex-presidente da Associação Internacional de Cirurgia Ambulatorial e atualmente editor da revista Ambulatory Surgery, que é a revista da Associação Internacional de Cirurgia Ambulatorial, e também presidente do Comitê Científico da IAS. Seus interesses incluem o uso de tecnologia da informação em medicina e tem apoiado o desenvolvimento e a implementação segura da tecnologia e informação em vários hospitais ao longo da última década. Então, é um prazer receber hoje o Dr. Ian Jackson conosco. Dr. Ian, I was just introducing you to our audience. We are very glad to have you with us today. And please, the word is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. I will share my screen. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for inviting me to talk to you today about information technology in ambulatory surgery, which is a major interest of mine. My background, as you've heard, is a consultant anaesthetist, and I work in York, which is just where the blue spot is, near the centre of England in the UK. But as mentioned, I'm actually a Scotsman working in England, and I've always regarded myself as a missionary in the true sense of Scottish missionaries, trying to educate the English in day surgery. This is my hospital, which is a rather old-looking hospital built in the 1970s, and my day surgery unit is on the first floor, just above the main entrance there. My background, I've been involved in managing day surgery since I was appointed in York in 1989, when we had 2 theatres and 12 trolley spaces. I've gone through 2 redesigns of the day surgery unit, the last one in 2009, where we created 8 theatres in the end, 2 separate eye theatres and 46 trolley spaces. And that, I hope, kind of gives you an impression of how important we see day surgery within our health service. Because that is for a catchment population of only 350,000 people. So that might amaze you that we have that many theatre spaces for that catchment population. So here is my vision that I would like to talk about today, looking at the care pathway from the start when the patient is in the pre-op phase, through the day surgery phase, through to discharge, where I have this vision that we should have systems that help support that pathway, be that from the pre-op assessment or pre-op information through to follow-up, and indeed a vision at home that perhaps we can use wearables as we move into the future that give us information about heart rate and movement on our discharge patients, or even more sophisticated medical devices that we can integrate into a web portal, allowing us to monitor our patients following discharge. But these are the areas that I would like to talk about today. So what is the reality? Well, if we look at the preoperative information and pre-op assessment, there are people moving in the direction of doing this in the UK and the US. This is one system that is used by some units in the UK called My Pre-op. And it's basically an online questionnaire that can be completed either at a kiosk, as shown in the picture here, or completed by the patient at home, just by logging into a web portal. And they complete a screening questionnaire that then allows the clinical staff to review the patient and consider whether they need to do more to work the patient up before they come to the hospital. This is a US system that my US colleagues tell me that some of them are using, One Medical Passport, which has several aspects to it, but as you can see on the left-hand side there, online pre-admission is part of the process. They can provide information to patients, but also do the streaming questionnaire. So if we look at efficient pre-op assessment, in the UK, what we do traditionally is we review the patient who is designated for day surgery. They go to a pre-op assessment clinic and they're reviewed on a face-to-face review by nursing staff. That is a very UK-centric method where the patient completes the screening questionnaire, the nursing staff takes their blood pressure, height and weight, works out their BMI, and ensures not just that the patient is suitable for the anesthesia and the surgery, but also helps start educating the patient about what will be involved on the day. So we find this is a very effective way of educating the patient. But over time, we've moved to doing some of the patients by telephone review because there is no need for every patient to be seen face to face. And what I think we're experiencing as time goes on, and if we move towards more teleconsultation, is that more patients can be managed simply by a teleconsultation review rather than a face-to-face review. And my own personal experience drives this because I'm now 62 and I recently had an operation, an orthopedic operation on my foot. And I went to pre-op assessment and the nurse said to me, "Why are you here? Why do you need to be here?" I trained that nurse in pre-op assessment. And I said, well, it's the process that we've put together. And it started me thinking, do we really need this? So I'm 62, but I go to the gym 3 times a week. I'm on a small dose of antihypertensive and nothing else. Why would I need to go to pre-op assessment? I need the education, but actually the screening questionnaire gave all the information that we needed. And certainly a review over by teleconsultation, perhaps something like we're doing now, would have been enough to give me the education that I needed. So I believe that as we move towards teleconsultation, we will be will allow us to actually have more time for pre-assessment, and we could potentially offer out-of-hours services much easier because the nurse or whoever's doing the assessment doesn't actually need to be in the hospital. They can be anywhere. That's the beauty of telehealth. And so I see things moving to a small proportion of patients needing face-to-face consultation on the right-hand side of the screen. And actually, the majority can be teleconsulted either by the nurse or by the anaesthetist. In the UK, we have an emphasis on the nurse, but in Holland and other countries, they have more of an emphasis on the anaesthetist doing that assessment. So that deals a bit about the teleconsultation, but what about the pre-op information? Well, many people now have access to the web and they have access to information there. And we are aware that some places are now producing apps. So if we look at my IAS colleagues, the Spanish colleagues are creating a web portal that includes day surgery information as part of the information to be provided. And my good colleagues in Braga in Portugal, they have an app. They have created an app. And so Vicente has an amazing setup. And so they now provide information on your mobile phone. My Finnish colleagues have created a web portal so the patient can register into what is called a virtual hospital, and they can choose the bit of the hospital that they're attending. And one bit is day surgery. And so they can go to the day surgery facility, enter it in the virtual hospital and get information about the procedure that they're about to undergo. So this is the sort of services that they're currently looking at. If I move on then to the situation where we're looking at on the day of surgery, then I think information about where the patient is in the system, And perhaps something around monitoring would be useful for managing our patients. And the interesting thing about tracking people is that some of our hospitals are now looking at not just tracking patients, but actually tracking staff and tracking equipment with the use of simple sensors that you attach to the people. And so you can do this with RFID tags that are very easy. This system uses teletracking, use an RFID tag. I don't recommend that we need to go to this extent of implanting it, as some professors have done, as in this X-ray, so that they can get in and out of their secure doors using an RFID card, RFID chip that's implanted. But we all have this technology in our passports now, and it's using similar technology that actually allows us to track equipment and people. So with a simple tag on our patients, they are now very cheap. We could track where our patients are in the hospital. But this schema shows you that actually we can see where Dr. Allen is, down on the left-hand side, where my ultrasound machine is. If I'm wanting to do a block on a patient, I can immediately see where it is. And so you actually have a map of the hospital and are able to track people. So I think technology like this will increasingly come to our day surgery facilities. In Denmark, they're using a much more traditional system, but it is again about tracking patient flow. And theirs uses touch-sensitive screens. So they have big screens where they can move staff and patients around the unit just by dragging and dropping them to where they are. And so they are tracking patients through their hospital and through their day surgery facility. And it increases the amount of information. So if a relative phones, someone can say, oh yes, your relative is in recovery. You know, this is where they are. And I mentioned monitoring, and monitoring is quite an interesting one for anaesthetic colleagues. And there are things now that are beginning to come out that might actually allow us to monitor patients both in the unit, or start monitoring them in the unit and continue it after discharge. And Sensium is one of these, is a UK company that's producing a patch that simply applies, as you can see, to the chest there, using 2 standard electrodes, just 2 ECG electrodes that clips onto those. And this patch gives you the heart rate, the temperature, and respiratory rate for your patient. It lasts 5 days. So you could actually attach this to your patient, and the ideal for me would be able to send them home with this patch on and actually have that information for the next few days while the patient is recovering at home. They're now moving to version 2, which will include an accelerometer for movement, which I think would be another step forward. But I'll come back to that when I'm looking at post-discharge. But this would offer us the facility to monitor our patients. I'm thinking both in and out of the hospital, but obviously I'm really keen on the out of hospital aspect because we have plenty of monitors within the hospital normally. But as we move to higher risk procedures, we're now doing hip and knee replacements as day surgery. As we move to higher risk patients with more comorbidities, with great, we're doing patients with higher and higher body mass indexes. We're taking on patients previously that we wouldn't have considered doing as a day case. And I think one of the blocks mentally for clinical colleagues in that movement is that lack of post-op monitoring. That's one of the concerns within clinicians. And if we can start to address those concerns, then I think we can accelerate the move to the higher, perhaps higher risk procedures. So naturally, that then brings me on to the discharge side of things. And again, I'm really interested in how we support the patients at home. And so whether that's web-based, app-based, how we do that, as well as the monitoring. So it's not just the monitoring. But if we look at my vision, the monitoring was an important part of it there at the top with the can we use wearables? Can we use specialist medical devices? And what is available out there? So I will go into that next. But I'm also interested in that patient interaction. In a time of where people use Facebook messaging, where we use WhatsApp, people are used to a digital age. So why can't we use a digital system that allows messaging to and from the patient and the clinical team? And so, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that. The telephone is still there. We telephone all our patients at 24 hours post-op. But my vision would be to provide a more seamless care and actually remove the need for the telephone. The telephone might still be used for some, but I think an audio-visual link, the teleconsultation, can be extremely powerful in our care of patients once they're discharged. So if we look what is happening around the world, my Finnish colleagues are looking at how they can use wearables and equipment that would link into their hospital web portal, their virtual hospital, so that clinicians could view the blood pressure, heart rate of their patients following discharge. So they are looking at, and there are systems that do allow you to do it. This is just one that I was able to find some information at, that allows you to discharge the patient with equipment that then logs the data onto their platform. And so you can log into their platform to see your patient data. There's a lot of interest. What could we do with, simple BP devices? I have a BP machine at home, just to, obviously, I said I was mildly hypertensive. I keep my blood pressure under review for my GP. I have a BP machine at home. So lots of people have them these days, and they are not expensive consumer products anymore. I think wrist-worn pulse oximeters are less of, but actually since the time of COVID, and I have one, I've bought a finger probe that I use, simple finger probe, that what was in the UK, £15, and gives very acceptable information that we could utilize things like that in the future. Of course, wearables like the smart watches are increasingly being able to give you blood pressure, not blood pressure, but heart rate, and some to a degree, perhaps pulse oximetry. And Nokia have a BP machine that can link in with Bluetooth. And so there are lots of things coming over the horizon, but these are not commercial grade, medical grade equipment. This is just standard equipment looking at the general population. If we look at more medical grade, then I know that Sensium are moving to the stage where they will have a module that you can send home with the patient that just uploads the patient data every few minutes to your web portal, where you can manage to monitor your patient. And that sounds very good. And once you have things like that, you start to be able to build in automatic alarms, so that if something isn't quite right, then you get a notification. And I can give you a clinical example of where that might be useful. And just one simple one. I said we were doing day case hip and knee surgery. We had one patient who actually wasn't a day case, went home at 48 hours to his family, and was doing fine. Day 4, he fell at home when his family were out, and he couldn't get up off the floor. He was on the floor for 6 hours until the family came home. Now, if he'd had an accelerometer that was linked into the hospital, that we were able to see that there had been inactivity for a prolonged period, and a simple alarm system to us, we could contact them to find out if there was a problem. And so the technology is probably there if we start looking at it. And it's things like that, I think, that start to increase the value of our systems. And people are interested in this. Philips have started looking at a system that allows them to provide, again, heart rate and accelerometer. So you get the single lead ECG, heart rate, and respiratory rate, and skin temperature. And again, accelerometer gives body posture and fall detection. There are more sophisticated ones coming out, like Vital Connect is one that I've been able to find. Current Health is another one if you look these up online, but they're not cheap. And you have to send the patient home with a module, not just with the thing strapped to the arm, but also a module that is GSM, which is the radio that uploads. It's like a mobile phone unit that uploads the data online. And so they are more expensive, but they are interesting, especially if you're moving more invasive procedures into the day surgery arena. I mentioned messaging, and I think messaging has a huge way forward for us. The general public is used to using WhatsApp, WeChat, I mentioned Facebook. We've contacted each other by Facebook. But when we're looking at medical certainty and we're looking at managing patients, there is an issue about WhatsApp and things like that with security. And there's also an issue that actually, if I'm having an interchange with my patient, I would like to be able to record that interaction into my medical records so that we have the governance to know that this has taken place. And I also think messaging gives us the potential for using it for follow-up. So I've been working with a company trying to get them onto this. This is just a slide that I use. And if you select your patients and you've got them registered onto your portal, registered onto your app, then if you have a system that allows simple, secure two-way messaging, that allows that messaging to be triaged and handed on to the most appropriate person. So there is always someone 24/7 that gets the message, but they can hand it on to the most appropriate person to respond. So if the request is, oh, I'm not sure when my appointment was, it goes to the administrator. If the question was, my wound is bleeding, then it can be handed on urgently to the doctor, consultant, the most appropriate person. And I think building in the facility for video consultation within the same app so that you can move from the message to actually saying, oh, I think my wound is bleeding a bit. Well, let me see it. You have a teleconsultation. The patient can point the camera at the wound and you can see the wound and see what's happening and make a decision. Do they need to come back to see you? Or you could tell them, no, that's fine. That's about much what as I would expect. But we will contact you again if there are any further issues. And so we're looking at trying to develop a system that is system agnostic, can be used on a tablet, any make of telephone, can be done with the web, that actually gives you that secure messaging, but also with the ability to triage and hand off to the most appropriate person. So you can have a team of people all managing these patients, because you have your nursing staff, you have your administrators, you can have a team of people. And so the message can be handed off to the most appropriate person. It makes it easy to manage it. But the other important bit is the ability to be able to download that interaction into your electronic record. And having that ability to move to a quick video consult if you feel it's necessary. And I see things like this become even more powerful if, because we've registered these patients, we can send our post-op satisfaction questionnaires to them to fill online. We can remind them to do it. So I think there's a lot that we can do, and that's just an example of a simple messaging. You don't need to see that because you know what messaging looks like, but that's the sort of thing that we are trying to move towards. So I was interested, does this actually could it make a difference? And there was an interesting study published in the British Journal of Anaesthesia here from our Scandinavian colleagues, and they used a quality of recovery score for 1,000 patients. But what they did is they divided them into two groups. 500 went on to daily review by an app or a web form, so the patient logged in. The control group only completed it on a piece of paper at day 7 and day 14. And they compared the two groups. And this is just an example of some of the questions that they answered in this quality of recovery score 40. It's easy to find online. And the group that did the scoring every day scored significantly better at day 7 and day 14 compared to the group that just did it on a piece of paper. They had better sleeping, reduced pain in the surgical wound, and generally felt general well-being and anxiety levels were lower. So they felt better, and it was significant, 69% of the patients in the active group against 57% in the control group with 1,000 patients. So it was extremely significant. I was really interested in this, thought, oh, that sounds good. Perhaps I should have it for my hospital. The only thing is, when I contacted them to find out the cost of running their system, they wanted €14 per patient. And there is just no way in the UK we would pay that much for running a service like that. But actually, the system I was talking about before would allow you to do it without that cost base. I struggled to see where their cost base was. So coming back and just thinking about reality of now, I think my vision does hold. I think there is the ability to move much more technology to support the day surgery, the ambulatory surgery pathway. And there is good work taking part around the world. And I think in the IAS, it's our responsibility to keep sharing that as much as possible between ourselves. And so that we can all build on what is happening. But actually, I think we're missing a trick. Perhaps we should walk before we run. And I think the easiest solution for us is actually to use the equipment that patients have, or to give some cheap equipment to patients if it is vitally necessary. But a lot of patients have equipment. And to set up a web portal that they can log in and record their own results. Patients like it. The evidence is, and it's a bit like completing that RAP score. The patients who feel involved in their care, who actually have somewhere to be able to report to, will gladly do it. I think there is a large majority of patients who would be very able to do it. There might be a smaller minority that are less able. But actually, a web portal would quite easily allow us to have their blood pressure, their temp, their SATs, pain score and nausea score, all entered by the patient. And as I said, that web portal, get them to log on and they could do their satisfaction questionnaire at a later date as well, whenever you wish to them to do it. And it'd be quite easy to send them reminders, SMS messages or an email to remind them to complete their daily or twice daily or 3 times daily, whatever you wish to set up, recording onto the system. So what I've tried to do is give you an overview of a vision that I have for IT use in the ambulatory surgery arena, and perhaps an idea of where we are, but also some ideas, hopefully, about what you could do in your own units. And perhaps there are things that we can do in our own units even now using the technology that is available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. I loved the presentation, the lecture.
Thank you.
I do have some exciting questions.
Okay.
Some comments also on your presentation. So, well, you've been at the front line of ambulatory surgery in the last decades, and I would be not exaggerating to call you one of the modern forefathers of ambulatory surgery in Europe. So after facing lots of challenges, you decided to dig deep into technology information. So considering that we have no reliable information systems designed for ambulatory surgery, at least in Brazil, as far as I know, do you have any advice to those who are forced to adapt hospital-driven systems without also bringing together inpatient surgery problems, especially considering that this design taking into account hospital and inpatient needs? In other words, do you think we need systems specifically designed for ambulatory surgery?
It's a good question. I am very lucky in my hospital, in that we have our own IT system that was developed. We have our own development team. So I'm spoiled. So for me, day surgery is just part of the hospital EPR, and there are aspects to it that require some changes that we were able to do. But my ethos has always been trying to maintain patient information within a single EPR. So whether the patient is in the day case facility or in my main hospital, I have, as a clinician, in the biggest sense, so as a nurse, as a doctor, have access to the full patient record. And so I am keen from that aspect, even though I am an ardent day surgery enthusiast, I am keen that we try and integrate our IT into our hospital systems wherever possible, so that we can keep the information flows and ensure that we have all the data. For where you have challenges in IT, we still, I am lucky in the UK, there are lots of day surgery facilities that have very little IT within the unit. Where there are issues with that, many of us are still struggling with perhaps just a theatre system that records what happened in theatre, and the rest of the care just being done on pieces of paper. And we still have large case notes. And it is a challenge. I think it is a challenge that we must try. You know, I've tried nationally to drive change to ensure that day surgery is recognised as an important part of surgery within hospitals, and ensure that any hospital system includes day surgery as part of the process. And so certainly my advice to you as a national association is actually highlighting the importance of day surgery, ambulatory surgery, to those who are responsible for design and development of systems within your hospitals, so that you try and maintain the profile of day surgery, so people remember that this mustn't just be an add-on, it needs to be part of the system. I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah, very, very good points. I have one more question, of course. We listen a lot about artificial intelligence, sophisticated algorithms, and Internet of Things, only to mention a few terms in vogue. On the other hand, maybe one of the most fascinating aspects of ambulatory surgery is its straightforwardness. So how can we make surgery just simple to most patients that just want to go home the sooner they can? So that said, what is your future vision for ambulatory surgery in the information era?
I think, yeah, so I think you mentioned buzzwords like artificial intelligence and things like that. I'm not a fan of artificial intelligence. I tend to talk about machine learning, because the intelligence is putting it is giving it too much credit. I think that we are moving towards much more machine learning. I think you're right in many ways. That keeping things simple, it's the KISS principle, keep things simple. I think ambulatory surgery and the pathway is quite is straightforward, and we should try and make it as straightforward as possible for our patients. So I'm hoping that the talk itself will have given you an idea of how we can support patients through that pathway using technology. I think in the future, we will have perhaps machine learning. I think the areas where that can help are probably when we're monitoring our patients at home. So if we have large numbers of patients at home that we are monitoring, actually machine learning letting us know that that patient has been still for 30 minutes and notifying. So it actually, instead of just putting an alarm on a piece of paper, it actually notified an appropriate person who could then check with the patient. Or we get to the stage, sophisticated stage actually, that may well be that it triggers the phone call, automated phone call to the patient. And if the patient responds and everything's okay, that's fine. If the patient doesn't respond, then it goes to the clinician. And then we're starting to perhaps use technology to help us support our clinicians as well as the patients at home. But I think day surgery is all about the pathway. Technology should be supporting us and supporting the patient. The pathway is well designed and is the appropriate way forward for a large percentage of our patients.
Ian, thank you very much for coming, for joining us. And we are very, very glad you came, you did. And I have to personally to thank you for everything you did to Sobracam in its beginnings. You were very supportive. You have put our first webinar, which was the inaugurative webinar of Sobracam, with a very, very highlighted form in the IAAS website. And I'm very, very glad you did it. It was very important for us.
I'm pleased. I'm very, very pleased. And it's lovely to see you all.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of all my colleagues of Sobracam, I'd like to thank you once again and look forward to work with you in other themes, other things to come.
Okay, I'd be delighted. Thank you very much indeed.